Yeah, might as well. Might as well get cracking on it. All right. So, question, top of page 1. Well, first of all, your questions, if you have any. Questions, comments, or concerns, worries, cares, tragedies, catastrophes? Yes?
I did some research about what's going on now in the college campuses.
Yes.
And I found several people who have written about the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Arab countries don't want anything to do with them.
Right. You know why, of course.
Well, yeah, because they do nothing but cause trouble.
No.
Well,
that's true, but that's a kind of a side issue.
Right. Well, it's because they don't. Well, everything I read is they don't. That is why Egypt blockaded the Palestinians from leaving Gaza to get into Egypt.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
They didn't want the political BS from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't hear any of the other Arab nations saying Hamas,
No.
support Hamas,
Well,
support Palestine.
Again, that's all totally beside the point. Yeah.
Right. But I just found it interesting that their own people, their own race of people, don't want anything to do with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, we have to remember why Gaza exists. Gaza is just one big, huge refugee camp. West Bank, pretty much the same thing. Why is that? Well, it's very simple. It's really very simple. When Israel declared itself a nation in 1947, and the displaced, in many cases quite illegally, but in any case, displaced the Palestinians that were living there, the Palestinians then went into Jordan, they went into Syria, they went into wherever, and they wound up put in refugee camps. The reason was because those nations, if they accept the Palestinians as citizens, in other words, if they accept that they are not going to ever go back home, okay, they're never going to go back to their homes and their farms and whatever in Palestine, in what is now Israel, if they accept that, that is basically saying they accept the status quo. That is, they accept the state of Israel as existing and in whatever form it happens to be, whether it's the expanded form or whether it's even the original form in 1947. And that they cannot do. You see, they can't do that. They have no ability in their political realms to acknowledge the existence of the status quo, the existence of the state of Israel in whatever status it exists. They can't do that. They simply cannot. It's not possible for them to do that. None of their kings, none of their sheiks would survive. None of their prime ministers, none of their political parties would survive something like that. And they simply do not believe that that's a good idea. It's kind of like you're having a negotiation. You're having a negotiation, you know. It's kind of like how my dad used to buy a car. My dad used to buy a car. He'd go in, and he was a man who didn't like to dicker. Yeah, he didn't like to dicker. And so he would go in and he would find a salesman, usually the brand new one, rookie, okay, greenhorn, and he would call him over and he would point to the sticker price on the car and he says, I want this car and I'll pay that, whatever it is. And of course, the salesperson, especially a young one, would go, oh, well, we can make you a deal, whatever. No, I don't want a deal, okay? I don't have time for a deal, all right? That's the price. And he would write out a check, and he'd split the check off and say, here, have it ready for pickup this afternoon. That's how he bought a car. Nice. And my brothers, would shriek in horror, Dad, you're overpaying, way overpaying, or you could have got $10,000 off on that car, whatever. And he would say, I don't care. I don't care. I don't go in to buy a suit and say, your suit is $500, I'll give you $350 for it. You don't do that. You pay whatever the suit hanging there, whatever's on the sleeve, you pay that, right? You get a jar of mayonnaise. You don't go up to the cash register and say, well, this jar of mayonnaise is $1.99. I'll give you $1.50 for it. You don't do that, right? Okay. So, anyway, the Arabs feel, they feel that if they recognize or if they accept the Palestinians as people in their own countries, in other words, they will say, okay, now you're a member of the country of Jordan, now you're a citizen of Egypt, now you're a citizen of Syria, now you're a citizen of Lebanon, whatever, okay? If they do that, that's basically saying, we'll pay sticker price. That it's ending, for all intents and purposes, totally ending any negotiation. We will therefore accept whatever land that you claim as Israel to be Israel. And we're not going to dicker about it anymore. We're not going to negotiate anymore. It's cutting off all discussion. Okay? So both politically and legally, I guess you could say, or logically, they can't take those people in. Now, over the years, the Palestinians have become very problematic. They have been very angry, of course, and upset, and so they're doing a lot of terrorism and all this kind of stuff, and they're causing a lot of problems whatever country they happen to be as refugees. And so what Jordan has done and Syria has sent them back to Gaza, which the Israelites basically say, well, that's a good place to stay. And that's why Gaza is one big, huge refugee camp. Now, at any time, anybody in Gaza or anywhere else who's Palestinian, anytime at all, they can request, and if they're born in Palestine or in Israel, they will probably be granted Israeli citizenship. Anytime they want to. If you want to become a citizen of Israel, okay, and you come from anywhere else in the world, you have to prove Jewish lineage. But if you want to become an Israeli citizen and you're a Palestinian, all you have to do is apply. Just apply. Just fill out the form. Fill out the paperwork. Turn the paperwork in. Of course, you can't be convicted of crimes and et cetera, and you can't be a terrorist and whatever. But fill out the form. Fill out the form. You will be a equal Israeli citizen, and you can vote and you can run for office and you can do anything. Okay. Very, very few of the Palestinians have done that. There are a good number, thousands of them I have over the years, but in general, when you compare them to the entire population of refugees in Gaza or on the West Bank, it's a relatively small percentage. I don't know whether it's 2%, 5%, but it's a small percentage. But the fact of the matter is they have done that. Okay, so imagine if you're a Palestinian. Okay, and this is 1948, and your land was confiscated by the Israeli government and given to a kibbutz or given to a Jewish family from Russia or wherever, United States, wherever, and you were told, get out. Or say you were living in Jerusalem and you were in that part of the town I told you about that was close to the Wailing Wall. And Jerusalem bulldozers came in, or Israeli bulldozers came in and bulldozed your house, and a number of churches too, and mosques. And they basically said, go, get out of here. Well, where are we going to go? Well, we don't care. Go somewhere. You can't stay here. And so you wound up in Gaza, and that's 1948. Now, imagine now it's 2024, and you are the great-great-great-grandson, probably, or granddaughter of one of those people. And you look forward and you say, or what's my situation? Well, your situation is you will die there. You will be buried there in Gaza. Your children will die there and be buried there. Your grandchildren will die there and be buried there. Your great-grandchildren will die there and buried. You see my point? Mm-hmm. You are the third or fourth, maybe fifth generation refugee, and for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 generations, your children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren will also be refugees. So, at this point, this is why, and this is not to, obviously, not to excuse anything they do. That's not the point. But this is to explain, why they're such troublemakers. They got nothing to lose. They got nothing to. They can't be put into any worse situation than they're right now. They can't. You can't make them any more miserable than they are, except kill them. And you could make the argument, especially if you're a Muslim, you can make the argument, well, if you die in Intifada, or if you die in Hajj, you die in the struggle, okay, you go immediately to paradise. So actually, you're better off. Okay? So this is why it's an impasse that will never, ever, ever, ever be solved, ever. Because the Jews certainly aren't going to just say, well, you know what, we'd rather live in New Zealand, and so we're going to move. They're going to pick up everything and go. They're not going to do that. There's no way they're going to do that. Neither are they going to say, well, we're going to give up the whole West Bank because there's how many millions of Jews living there in all these kind of encampments. And it doesn't matter whether the United Nations approves it or not. They're not going to give it up. They're not going to give up the Golan Heights that has the high ground over Damascus. They're not going to do that. That's insane. Okay? So it's a permanent impasse. Okay? Permanent. I don't think anybody gets this. The college kids that Bruce is talking about don't understand this. When they say river to the sea, well, that means that if you allow Israel to exist, okay, maybe it can exist right around the Sea of Galilee or right around, south of Jerusalem, but you're going to go from the river to the sea, and you'll basically split it in two countries, like Pakistan used to be back in the day. And that was a disaster for Pakistan, and that's not, the Jews aren't going to allow that. They're not going to give up. They're not going to give up 1 square inch. Not 1 square inch, okay? And so these idiot college kids who are just totally ignorant, the only word I can use is ignorant. They're ignoramuses, okay? They have no idea what they're talking about. They have no idea what they're talking about. And they can take over administration buildings and take over libraries and overturn desks and break windows and turn cars upside down and firebomb automobiles and you name it. And they just go crazy. And they can give up their scholarships and they can be suspended from college all they want to. That's not going to accomplish a darn thing. It's insane. It really is insane. Bruce?
Well, I was going to say that most of the articles or papers that I read was that they don't want them in their country because they create dissension.
Yeah, of course they do.
In whatever country they go to,
whatever country.
For whatever reason.
Right.
It's not because they're on plight. And one of the papers talked about that the best victim, the best people playing the victim are the Palestinians because they've been doing it since the...
Right, so it's 48, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They're a victim. Israel pays them X billions of dollars a year to support the infrastructure in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
They give money to them. They provide health care. And when Israel, I think it was in the 60s, I'm trying to remember the paper, wanted to take over the infrastructure in Gaza to make sure that the money that they're getting goes to the
Right, they wouldn't allow it, no.
And Hamas said no.
No, right, of course not.
They used it for weapons.
And again, the payments are not going to the people individually.
Exactly.
If you go up to the reservation, or if you go to Alaska, okay, you talk to the people on the reservation. This is true of almost any reservation, because almost every reservation has casinos and things now. Every single person who is a recognized member of the Apache tribe up on the reservation, every family anyway, gets a check I don't know anymore if it's once a year, 4 times a year, every month. It used to be once a year. I think now it's, I don't know, maybe once a month. Anyway, you get a check. And it goes directly to you. It doesn't go to the tribal council. It doesn't go to whatever political party is ruling that particular part of the reservation. It goes directly to you. And then the state, in this case, state of Arizona, takes care of the roads, make sure there's water, make sure there's electricity, make sure there's gas, make sure there's, whatever. They don't have to, the reservation doesn't have to do that. The Indians don't have to do that, okay? They don't have anything to do with the infrastructure, okay? And that's part of the treaty. The treaty was a deal between the United States government and the Indian nations. You Indian nations basically admit you lost. You lost. We won, you lost. We will let you live on probably the worst territory in that state, okay? Or the worst that we can find anywhere near you, okay? And we'll let you be your own sovereign country. You can have your own police force. You can have your, you can do it. You can have your own other various legal systems and other kinds of things like that. You can run yourself. You can elect your tribal chairman, just like old times, right? You can have a chief, okay? Whoop-de-doo, okay? We will maintain your roads. We will maintain your gas lines and your electricity and everything else. And then you can make whatever laws you want to, which, of course, they found years ago that, hey, we don't have laws against gambling. And so, bingo, we can put casinos up. And, of course, the richer they get, then they buy land in metropolitan areas like Phoenix. And as soon as they buy it, they declare that part of the original reservation. And then they put a casino on it. Okay? They may be dumb, but they ain't stupid. Okay? They've got this figured out. All right? And along every interstate in the country now, no matter where you go, no matter what state you're in, from Wisconsin to Florida to California to Maine, okay, along every interstate, you have this little chunk of reservation that they bought with their casino money from the casino that was out in the boonies, because us gringos, we're so stupid that we will drive an hour out into the, whatever, and lose our money out there, okay? And so they made lots of money. They made enough money to buy a piece of land near the interstates and whatever. So the Palestinians, you see, they don't get checks. The money that Israel gives them, the billions of dollars that Israel gives them, goes to groups like Hamas. Okay, goes to political entities, all right, which are incredibly corrupt. The head of Hamas doesn't even live in Gaza. The head of Hamas lives in either Qatar or Abu Dhabi or one of those other sheikdoms over Is Doha? Okay. And he lives in a huge mansion, and he has billions of dollars, and he's incredibly rich. And he doesn't go to Gaza. He doesn't live there. And most of the other big players in the political movement, they don't live there either. Okay? So the billions of dollars that Israel or the United States or anybody else or Egypt or any other country gives to the Palestinians goes directly to these political groups, and then they eyedropper it out to the people to keep the people as miserable as possible, so that the people will be always ready for revolution at any moment's notice. And then on top of that, unlike the reservations, they tell the Israelis, no, you can't come in and fix potholes. We'll fix the potholes. But of course they don't. Because if they fix the potholes, and if they make the water run, and if they make the electricity work, then the people are going to be satisfied. They don't want the people satisfied. They don't want the people happy. They want the people miserable. They want them as miserable as they could possibly be. Okay? So that's why I say it's a complete, total, and absolute impasse that will never, ever, 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 ever be solved. Now, the Palestinian people, they of course know this, but rather than throw the bums out, and if they voted against Hamas, they would probably be taken out and shot anyway, but if they voted out Hamas, who's going to replace it? There's no other group that has any kind of, organization you know. It's like in Chicago. Okay, great example. Talk to people in Chicago. Who runs Chicago? Okay, well, the aldermen. Okay, what are aldermen? Well, aldermen are like our city council people, only in Chicago, there's an alderman for every, kind of like a congressman for a congressional district, okay? And the aldermen have always been corrupt. They always take a lot of money under the table. They're paid off by Irish gangs, Polish gangs, Italian gangs, Mexican gangs, black gangs, you know, whatever, okay? But if you vote out the alderman and vote somebody in who has no connection with the gangs or with anything else, nothing gets done. The only way things get done, and this is true some days in New York and Baltimore and many of the other countries or cities, large cities too. Los Angeles is a good example. Okay, you need an organization of some kind, even if it's a criminal organization. You need that organization to be able to function to get even the little bit of food or a little bit of, like a grocer, for example. Okay, let's say you want to open a grocery store in the Watts section of LA or in Compton, all right? You're going to have to pay off the councilman there. And the councilman will make sure that the gangs don't bother you as long as you pay him off. If you stop paying him off, or if you elect somebody who refuses to take payoffs, your store will be burned down before you can stock it. That's just a fact of life. That's a fact of life, and it's a fact of life in all major cities, whether it's Houston or Dallas or Albuquerque, no matter where it is. Okay? So the Palestinians are no different than people in Chicago that have been in poor, completely poverty-stricken and in ghettos their entire lives, and their fathers and their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers before them. Okay? But they're stuck, because if they vote the Democrats out, or if they vote people with ethics in, if they vote good people in, their entire structure, the societal structure of their area, ghetto or neighborhood, will completely collapse. Police won't be able to come in, firemen won't be able to come in, paramedics won't be able to come in, hospitals will close. It'll be a disaster. And so it's no good getting mad at the blacks and Mexicans and others who live in these areas and keep just voting in the same stupid people all over and over and over again. They got no choice. They got no choice. Okay? Well, the Palestinians are in the same boat. You got no choice. They have to support Hamas because there's nobody else who's going to come in there. And if somebody does try to come in there, it'll be a gang war, and you'll probably get caught in the crossfire and get killed. So, and the students who, again, don't know this. They're completely insane. They have no clue as to what's actually going on. And so they can march around and say, you know, free Palestine and river to the sea and all this kind of stuff. You know, and all they're doing, really, all they're doing is they're looking back with fondness. You know, oh, my parents, they marched against the Vietnam War. Or my parents or my grandparents marched against segregation in the South. Or they marched against Jim Crow laws.
And they marched with Joe Biden.
Right, right. And, oh, boy, wasn't that glorious. Yeah. Now it's our turn. We get to overturn desks and firebomb libraries. Yeah. Okay? That's all they're doing. That's all they're doing. You know, so when they're old, you know, and their grandkids ask them, well, gee, Daddy, what did you do during the great Hamas-Israel war? And you won't have to say, paraphrasing General Patton, you won't have to say, well, I dug latrines in Louisiana. You get to say, oh, I was right there on the front lines, boy. I was right out there with them. I had my Palestinian flag and my kafiri on my head looking like, Arafat. And boy, you know, and I overturned the president's desk. Yeah. And I threw a Molotov cocktail into the library. Yeah. Yeah. That's what they want. That's all they want. They don't want anything else. They're not going to accomplish anything else.
They want to be part of a crowd.
Yeah.
They want us to send them a new library to put up.
So anyways. All right, let's finish this chapter. Why is it appropriate for God to tell us not to go out for revenge, but all fine and good for him, should be, to exact revenge? Simple question. Yeah.
Because he's God.
Yeah, because he's God. Because he's God. Yeah. And again, let's understand what that means. Now, God is wise, God is just, God is good. Nothing God does is bad or unjust, and that's true no matter how it looks to us. You know, when the 5-year-old gets leukemia and dies, all right, and it's a good, let's say he's a good kid. He's not a screamer, you know, he's not, you know, putting matches between the toes of the cat, you know, or anything like that, all right? And we look at that and we say, that's unfair. That's unjust. And I wouldn't necessarily get angry with somebody who said that. Okay? I would say, yeah, it looks that way, doesn't it? I would agree. It looks that way. Right? But of course, we don't know the whole picture. God knows the whole picture. So when God takes his vengeance out on somebody, that's appropriate because it fits into the overall scheme of getting the most possible number of people that could be saved to be saved. And that's always the bottom line. That's always the bottom line. Okay. Now, are we going to be able to understand or to see or to figure out what the connection is between little Joey, who gets leukemia and dies at 5, and Mr. Jones, who then gets into heaven? No. 99.9% of the time, no, we're not going to see that. Will we see it when we get to heaven? Maybe. I'm not going to promise things I can't guarantee. Maybe. But again, that's beside the point. God is God. And God can do whatever he feels like. And all we have to go back to is his characteristics. What are his characteristics? His characteristics are perfection. His characteristics are love. His characteristics are wisdom. His characteristics are mercy, etc. Those are his characteristics. He's not mean. He's not cruel. He's not nasty. He's not cold-hearted. Those are not his characteristics. Okay? And so that's what we fall back on. Okay? So that's like I say, it's a very easy question, but then again, it's a very hard question too. When you run against people who feel that God has taken it out on them, his vengeance, let's say, okay? Which the fact of the matter is, of course, he took his vengeance out on Jesus. So you could say whatever he does really isn't vengeance. It may be consequences, but it can't really be the true idea of revenge or vengeance because he took that out on Christ, on his son. But even so, even if it is consequences, we're not gonna always see, how that fits together. Okay, yeah.
And also, this world is not perfect.
Right.
Because if we had no disease, if we had no strife or challenges in our life, we'd be in heaven.
Right. Yeah. Right.
That is what we're striving to get.
It wouldn't be the world, would it? Oh. Last two verses we've already read, but just to kind of go over them again, there's a quote here, and talking about how we treat our enemies, and the reasoning behind it is somewhat obscure. The last verse, of course, is very clear, but the verse before that, or the section before that, heaping burning coals, has always perplexed most people. Let's go to the notes. Paul's next words in verse 20 are a direct quotation from the book of Proverbs. The context in the quotation serves as its interpretation. A literal heaping of burning coals on someone's head would constitute an act of extreme cruelty. I think we'd all admit that. The act might give relief to pent-up feelings of hatred for the one who does the heaping, but for the person who is the recipient of the heat, it means intense suffering. Bible scholars have argued this point for centuries, since it seems that the image of burning coals does not represent an act of kindness. However, this image is actually a metaphor referring to the hot pangs of conscience instead of revenge. The lesson is clear that God wants us to conquer our enemies by making them our friends. God wants us to reflect His dealings with us in a way we treat those who hate us. So what do? What we want to do is treat them so good that it will affect their conscience. Treat them so good that they will think whatever it was that they did, in whatever way they are an enemy to us, that their conscience will get at them and cause them not to be our enemy. Okay? It's not talking about actually dumping coals on people's head. It's talking about creating that hot conscience, okay? To give them in their mind, in their heart, if you will, give them that regret, okay, for being an enemy. Now, there is, of course, one caveat to that. What is that? Well, what if the person you're dealing with has a dead conscience? Someone we refer to as a sociopath. Sociopath has no conscience. And they seem to be multiplying like rabbits. Okay? How do you deal with an enemy who is a sociopath? Well, I think in that case, you look at the sociopath as a distinct danger to your existence, your time of grace, and that time of grace of your loved ones. And you do whatever is legal and possible to keep yourself far away from such people, or keep them far away from you. And if they don't keep far away from you, and if they threaten your existence, you shoot them. Dead. You don't shoot to wound. You don't try to wing them, okay, like the cowboys, right? If you've ever attended a CCW class, okay, what's one of the things they tell you? Keep pulling the trigger until nothing comes out. And that is exactly what God would have you do in a situation like that. You're dealing with somebody who has no conscience, or at least seems like they have no conscience. You're dealing with somebody who can't be dealt with in this way. You're dealing with somebody who is a direct threat to your continuing life on this planet, right? Then you empty the clip, empty the magazine, whatever, okay?
And then, of course, you drag them inside your house.
Well, that doesn't work usually, but no. Then you pull out your card, okay, that has your lawyer's number on it, and you call your lawyer, okay? And when the police show up, you very nicely, gently hand them your gun and say, I will answer all your questions as soon as my lawyer gets here. And then you shut up. Hopefully that will never happen to you. But just in case it ever does, remember, okay, that no matter what you may think about our legal system, innocent until you're proven guilty, the exact opposite is often true. You are considered guilty until proven innocent. Right. And so shut up. Shut up. Just shut up. Don't say anything. Okay? Except you can say, or your lawyer would tell you, you can say, I was in fear of my life. Or protecting the life of my loved ones. That you can say. All right. Going on. Paragraph 18. Verse 21 wraps up everything as the apostle has stated in his chapter, and it forms the bridge to the next chapter, which deals with our responsibilities toward the government. Do not be overcome is the imperative form of the Greek verb, which is derived from Nike, victory. It means to subdue. Do not be subdued. Do not let evil have a victory over you. The idea of its use here is that unless we take some kind of good action, evil will get the victory over us. It also reminds us that as believers, God has given us the power to resist wickedness. Being conceived and born in a world in which evil reigns supremely does not mean that evil is irresistible to us who are born again. That's a very important sentence. We cannot use original sin or our old Adam as an excuse. It is not a valid excuse for sin. It is not a valid excuse for acting in a bad way, in an evil way. We cannot use that. We cannot say, well, gee, the devil made me do it. Or my old Adam, they made me do it. Or we live in a sinful world and so I had no choice. You cannot do that. Jesus states emphatically, in this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. And since he has overcome the world, we can overcome the world. We can overcome evil with good. Now, sometimes that won't be enough. And sometimes God will allow us, as he did his saints and martyrs in the early church, to be killed. That does not mean that the world overcame them, simply because the lion ate them in the arena, or the bear. Bears were actually used much more than lions. Lions were expensive. Bears were pretty cheap. So if you wanted to throw Christians to some wild animals, it was a lot cheaper to send out a bunch of bears. They weren't expensive in the same way as lions. Lions you have to take from Africa or wherever. You got to transport them over long distances. Got to keep them alive for a long time, stuff like that. They're expensive. Bears will eat anything. If you've ever been on a camping trip, you know that. Bears will eat absolutely anything. Matter of fact, they'll eat a lot of things that aren't edible. They'll eat anything. Okay? And there were a lot of bears in Italy, a lot of bears all over the area, a lot of bears everywhere. Bears can get along. Bears are like coyotes. They can live just about any place. And so the Romans had a lot of bears. And so they'd throw the Christians out there. Sometimes they'd wrap them in bacon, kind of thing. But they'd throw the Christians out there and let the bears loose. Anyway, so that happened a lot. Okay, it did. All right, it did. But that doesn't mean they were overcome by the world. Because, of course, they went to heaven. And, of course, their martyrdom, in many cases, spurred a lot of people toward Christianity. So the world certainly didn't win, or the devil didn't win. God did. It is the victory of Jesus Christ on the cross that enables us to resist the evil in the world and in ourselves, not only by doing good, but by being good. How can we apply Paul's advice here in our daily lives as believers? That's a kind of a large general question. I guess the best thing to say here is that we can apply this by looking for opportunities to do good in a way that especially reflects well, not on us in particular, but on our belief system, on our faith, on the Bible, on God, on Christianity, whatever. We look for opportunities to do that, and especially when we're in a situation where we are being treated unjustly, where we are being treated in an unfair way, where we are being persecuted, where we are being singled out and all that, not to strike back in the same way, not to get angry, not to overturn desks or throw Molotov cocktails around, but do the exact opposite. Okay? Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Ralph Abernathy, a lot of these people tried to teach their followers what's called civil disobedience, but it was usually peaceful. It was peaceful civil disobedience. Didn't always stay that way, unfortunately. Even a guy like Malcolm X, who was really for kind of the violent overthrow of the country over the government when he was alive, kind of came around towards the end of his life to seeing things more the way Martin Luther King and others saw it. Jesse Jackson too, another example, kind of came around a little bit to a less radical, less confrontational, less violent way of trying to get their point across. I think our demonstrators nowadays would do well to follow those examples rather than the examples of a lot of the Vietnam demonstrators who were very violent. I know they were very violent because they chased me quite a bit, and it was a very violent time for me and my ROTC buddies. So I think being the opposite is always available for us, and that is one way in which we can follow this advice. Any further questions on chapter 12? Chapter 12, chapter 12. Chapter 13. Chapter 13, of course, is a famous chapter, really, because of Paul's beginning, where he talks about the government and the purpose of the government and the Christians' duties and responsibilities toward that government. I'm sure this was a difficult section for the congregation in Rome and for many believers of that time. I'm sure that Paul's words here were not real popular. Okay. Probably we should go through the first few paragraphs before we start reading. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So let's just check the notes here. Let's go to the notes and go through those first. Okay, as a Jew, Paul knew well the history of his own people. At the time of their birth as a nation, at the exodus from Egypt, they became a theocracy, ruled directly by God through a high priest, and remained so for several centuries until the days of Samuel. Samuel, of course, was a judge, and there were other judges too. So you could say that the judges and the high priests, you might say, kind of ruled together, although the judges really didn't have an ongoing day-to-day, month-to-month, week-to-week kind of dealing with the people. The judges, it seems, were kind of raised by God on special occasions when the people need to be rescued from their enemies, which they brought down on themselves by their own stupidity and foolishness. So I didn't include the judges here. Were they political leaders? I guess you could say that. They were secular leaders in a sense that way. But again, they were raised by God and directed by God immediately, that is, without a go-between, although sometimes the priests functioned that way. The book of Judges testifies to the fact that a theocracy is not a workable premise for people who have an innate, stubbornly rebellious, sinful nature. Theocracy does not work with unbelievers. And the Jews proved themselves very quickly after the death of Joshua, proved themselves to be mainly, that is the majority of them, unbelievers. They proved themselves to be always looking for another god, always looking for an idol that will entertain them and give them pleasure. That's what they're looking for. They weren't looking for a God who would test them. They were looking for a God who would give them trials. They weren't looking for a God who would give them a lot of rules and regulations that they'd have to follow and all. They weren't looking for that kind of God. They were looking for a God. They were looking for what I like to call the good time God, the party God. And there are lots of party gods around, tons and tons of them, okay? And that's what they're looking for. And so again, they proved themselves to be unbelievers. And I'm sorry, but a theocracy only works when you have a majority of the people, a pretty good-sized majority of the people, being believers. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And that's what happened. Of course, all people are conceived and born in sin, are thus naturally inclined to disobey God. However, some cultures are more rebellious than others and more prone to disobey even their own cultural norms and morals. Unfortunately, the descendants of Jacob had this tendency in spades. What do you remember most about Jacob? Anybody? If I say the word Jacob, we're doing a Bible quiz, and I tell you, give me the first word that comes to your mind when I say a name. So like I say Abraham. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Come on. First thing, boom, Abraham. Jesus, okay. That's a good solution. That's a good answer.
Yeah, let's go with son.
Yeah, right, Isaac, okay. If I say King David, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
God in God's eyes.
God's friend, okay, whatever, right. My first thought is Bathsheba, of course, but that's, you know. So if I say Jacob, first thing comes to your mind, boom. Huh? Ladder, okay, Jacob's ladder, all right. Well, okay, and why was Jacob, why did the ladder appear to Jacob? Where, first of all, where did the ladder appear to Jacob? At a place that would later on become called Bethel, okay, the house of God, okay. The ladder went to heaven, okay. And why was Jacob, because his father Isaac lived in Beersheba, or Hebron, can't remember which, at that moment. But anyway, why was he in Bethel, which is quite a ways from either one of those places? Why was he there? Why was he sleeping on a rock for a pillow?
He was traveling too.
He was traveling to go live with Uncle Laban, right?
Yeah.
And why was he doing that? Why was he getting away from home? Why was he running away from home? Why was Jacob running away from home? Get away from his brother because what he had done to his brother. Cheated him. Okay. So the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Jacob is liar and cheat. Because that's what he was. Okay? He cheated his brother out of his inheritance. He lied to his father saying, I'm Esau, right?
Yeah.
He put the fake hair on his arms, right? Cooked the stew, or his mother cooked the stew actually. Okay? So he's a liar. He's a cheat. He's a thief. Okay? He gets up to Laban. What does he do when he gets to Laban? How does Jacob increase his flock?
Get married.
He tricked Laban, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, with the whole business with the ewes and the sheep and all of the striped poles and all that kind of craziness. Yeah, he cheated him. Okay? And then it was like, see you in the morning, Laban. And then what did he do? He snuck out and was going to run back home. Laban didn't want to let him go. And so he lied to him, and he snuck out of town. Like the Baltimore Colts snuck out of Baltimore back in the day, huh? In the darkness of night. So, liar, cheat, sneak, okay?
Ended up being a killer.
And the Israelites are more Jacob than they are Isaac or Abraham. They are of Abraham. But remember, Abraham's got big branches, right? Abraham's got lots of branches. He's got the whole branch, of Ishmael. He's got that one. Plus he's got all the children of Keturah, 7 sons or whatever they were of Keturah out there. And then, of course, Isaac's got his brother Esau, and a whole bunch of nations come from them. But the Israelites come from Jacob. And so you could kind of put it this way, that all the sneakiness, the lying, cheating, conniving, all of that kind of stuff, shrewd, whatever, was kind of concentrated in Jacob and then spread out through his 12 sons. And Judah, we know, got it in spades too. And of course, the Jews are named Jews for Judah. Okay? Remember what Judah did. You all remember what Judah and Tamar. Can you tell me the story? Judah and Tamar. Tamar was a local girl. She was not a Jew. Okay? She had married one of Judah's sons. Judah's sons were unbelievers. Judah's sons were killed by God because they would not raise up children with their wives. So Tamar, one of the wives, did not have a child, and so she dressed it up like a prostitute and waited on the corner, okay, Sunset and Vine or whatever, okay, for Jacob to come along. She propositioned Jacob. Jacob didn't even bat an eye. He didn't even slow down. He hightailed it into her tent and did his thing. She became pregnant, right? And one of the ancestors of Jesus, a guy by the name of Perez, is a direct result of the prostitution of Tamar to Jacob. Talk about a sordid past. Ooh, okay? Let's not even talk about Rahab. That's a whole other story. But this is Jacob. Okay? So Jacob proved himself to be just like his daddy. And then what happened? He lied, he cheated, he stole, he snuck around to try to get out of the being named the father of this child. So, folks, okay, it's not surprising, right, that the people have had the problems that they've had down through the centuries. And again, God knew this. And you could say very clearly, God chose Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Judah, not because of their righteousness, but in spite of their rebelliousness. And God does this all the time. Paul says this in Corinthians. Okay? So that's an important point to need to remember always. Obviously, God knew this when he chose Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to become his chosen people. Still, he tried to give them the wonderful blessings of being ruled directly by him, but they refused to bend to his will, as they do to this very day. Okay? The message of Judges is summed up in the words, "In those days Israel had no king, and everybody did as he saw fit." Sometimes the translation you might remember is, everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And see, this is the situation we have now, right? Everybody makes up their own morals as they go along. Right? So the protesters, well, to us, it's ethical and moral to firebomb the library, or it's ethical and moral to destroy the president of the university's office. Or to us, it's ethical and moral to keep Jews from attending classes, or in some cases, teaching classes. And to us, that's ethical and moral. We have determined that that is right in our eyes. And it doesn't matter what the law says to us. See? And like the whole transgender thing, too, same thing, okay? I feel, okay, for this guy who thinks he's a girl, or wants to be. And I feel that he should be allowed to do whatever he wants to do, or I should be allowed to do whatever I want to do. So we do whatever is right now in our own eyes, and the law has less and less and less and less ability to tamp that down, to keep that under control. Because people just decide, I'm going to be my own law. I am going to function by my law, and I don't care what the law in the book says, which is anarchy, isn't it? And that's what we have going on. We have moral and ethical anarchy happening in our society. Even during the centuries in which Israel was a monarchy, only a very few kings realized that they ruled by the grace of God and even attempted to uphold God's wills. So how many good kings do we have out of all the kings of Judah? 5, 6 maybe? How many good kings do we have out of all the kings of Israel, the northern kingdom? 0. Not one good one. Not one good one of the northern kingdom, and only a handful in the southern kingdom. Okay? When Paul wrote this epistle to the Romans, Israel had been subjected to Roman rule for over a century, closer to a century and a half. In fact, the Jews never really regained their full independence after the return from Babylonian captivity. They were under Persia, then Greece, and Egypt, and finally Rome. Now you could say that, for a very few years, maybe 50, 60, 75 years, you could say, well, the Maccabees ruled. Yeah, but understand that the Maccabees only ruled because Persia and Egypt and other countries, and Syria, really didn't have the fervor, the passion to go after them. They could have anytime they wanted to. They could have subjected them anytime they wanted to. They were, in most of their history of the Maccabees, Israel was a vassal state. And it started out as a vassal state to Rome and then became completely taken over after it rebelled so many times. So it really didn't have, for the Jews to say, well, we came back from Babylon and established our own nation. No, you didn't. You were ruled by Babylon, or you were ruled by Persia, actually. Cyrus, the Mede, Persian, gave them the permission. They couldn't just leave Babylon and go back to Israel on their own. Cyrus, the Persian, had to give a decree to allow them to go back to Jerusalem, back to Judea. Yeah. They couldn't do it on their own. They were allowed to go. And then the Persia ruled over them for a long time until Alexander the Great came along. Alexander the Great came along, beat Persia, and so they became under the rule of Greece. And then Alexander died, and they became divided. Part of them were under Greece, part of them under Egypt. The Greek part was really Syria at that time. And so they were ruled partly by the Ptolemies, of which Cleopatra was one later, and part of them by the Seleucids. Okay. Now, again, then Maccabees came along, threw the Seleucid out, but then made an alliance with Egypt, with the Ptolemies. And it was only because of their alliance with the Ptolemies that Israel was allowed to remain quote-unquote independent. They really weren't, but they could act like they were. And then soon, Egypt, of course, was conquered by Rome, and Rome conquered Judea, or Palestine. Okay? So they were never, once they were destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC, they were never again a sovereign nation, ever. A real, totally independent sovereign nation. Okay? Good thing to remember. The principle of government is linked to man's fall into sin. Governments are intended by God to curb crime in society and to provide a workable infrastructure for everyday life. Without sin, of course, there is no crime to curb and no need for government. Government, therefore, is God's provision for man's need as a sinner. This must be clearly understood. You will not hear this if you take a class in government. Okay? You go to high school or college and you take a class in government, you will not hear the only reason government exists is because of sin. But you better know that going in, because otherwise there's no purpose for government. Government is to keep a lid on sin. Really government is really not even for roads and bridges, really. That should be done by local states, municipalities, whatever. But in our day and age, it's become a national type thing, right? One more paragraph, then we'll stop. Paul's words on the topic of a Christian's responsibility toward a secular government apply, first of all, to the time in which they were written. It is important to observe that Paul wrote these words to people who lived in Rome, at the center of the Roman Empire, the place where Caesar ruled as complete despot, with few checks on the use of his power. You have to remember, this is not the time of the Roman Republic. Now, under the Roman Republic, things were different. The Senate had a lot more power, and the Senate was, you might say, in a way at least, popularly elected, kind of. Only certain people could vote, but that's another issue. But the Senate was responsible to the people in a way. And so that was a republic, a representative democracy. After the Battle of Actium, Octavian, the nephew of Caesar, of Julius Caesar, was given the title Augustus and made emperor. Basically because the Senate said, we don't want to do this anymore. We want one guy to take the heat. We want one guy to make the decisions. Because the reason we had a civil war before between Antony and Cleopatra on one side and Octavian on the other side is because we couldn't agree. When you have a representative government and that representative government ceases to function because the representatives can't get along, can't do what's necessary, okay? What almost always happens is either the representatives voluntarily give up their ability to rule their government and give it to one guy, or sometimes a trio, sometimes, or a duo, 2 or 3 guys, people, or a civil war. Sometimes both. Okay? In the case of Rome, that's what happened. In the case of Rome, the Senate couldn't function anymore. There were a lot of political factions and parties, and they couldn't get along, they couldn't accomplish anything. Then they agreed, okay, let's have 3 guys. We have a triumvirate, and we'll have this triumvirate make the final decisions. Well, then the triumvirate, each of them got big heads and said, well, I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss, they all said. And then they killed one of them, and then there were only 2 left, and those 2 fought each other. Civil war. That's what happened. And then when that civil war was over, and Octavian won, the Senate was so grateful, and everybody kind of agreed, okay, you won, you're the boss. And so the Senate said, oh, okay, we'll just make you emperor then. And we'll give you total power. We'll still be here as advisors, but we'll give you total power.
Sounds familiar.
Does, doesn't it? And so Octavian said, I'll take it, thanks. All right? So he was the first, and then there were a number after him. And by the time you get to Paul, you're 60 years after Octavian. There's been 4 or 5 emperors. Okay? Now Nero, what was he? Grand nephew? Something like that of Augustus. Now Nero's on the throne. And Nero started out as a good emperor, by the way. He did. Nero was a very good organizer. He was very good at administration. He made a lot of good decisions. He was really pretty good first few years of his reign. And then he got crazy and went nuts. But at first he was pretty good. I think you can say that in general most of the emperors were pretty good as they started out. The democratic Roman Republic had been swept away by a series of civil wars and rebellions, and Julius Caesar's nephew Octavian was named Augustus and declared the first emperor a true strongman or dictator that had to answer to no one for his actions. A long line of emperors, most of whom were notoriously evil tyrants, would continue until the dissolution of the Western Empire in the late 5th century. Okay, we'll stop there. So we're still kind of introducing the whole concept here. So if you have any notes from school on political theory and governmental, whatever, history, read up. Anything else? Okay, let's close. May the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us all. Amen.